So, Lauren, are
Huh?
you ready for another practical pet chat?
Sure. It's what we
Excellent.
talk about all the time anyway. So,
That is so true. And I want to start, and I'll give away when we're recording this a little bit, but it's that time of year when every product hits you. And it struck me as I was looking at these products, wow, we've really come a long way as a industry, as pet parents. There is so much that is out there and available for our pets. And personally, I love it, but I do find it a little overwhelming, especially because of how much I want to do for my pets. That sometimes you see that headline or you see oh my, this was the game changer. So I wanted to start with, how do you feel about the evolution? Because you and I have been doing this for a long time. And
long time.
when we got in this, there was no grounding mat for my dog. And that's not you're grounded. That's the earth's energy
Right.
coming and resetting, folks. So we've come a long way in
Yeah.
many ways.
Well, yeah. So we're in the industry, and if we're overwhelmed, you can imagine how it
Right.
is for the regular pet parent. I I have a little bit of issue with the fact that um, you're right. There wasn't a grounding mat, to use your example, but the the materialization of everything,
Yes.
is what is is the overwhelming part, I think, because what happened to grounding with the fact that your dog doesn't wear shoes and you just walk him outside?
Okay. You and I get that. For those out there don't, it's the same thing. Yeah.
You're a human,
But
so
but you're 100% right. It is that notion of like, just because we can make this, do we really need to? Is it one more thing? And I also think too, what's interesting is sometimes it borders on fear tactics, and that's where I get my
yeah,
issue.
yeah. The commercialization of everything, I support business. So, I like people to have options. I like that we're constantly creating things, everything can be used for good and bad.
Right.
So, I look at some of these commercialized ideas and I think like a grounding mat, which is probably great if you are in, I'm trying to think of an example that would be great because all I can think about is
Well, if you're
dogs
in a
are
high
barefoot.
rise, yeah, if you're in a
Yeah,
high rise,
but you
okay.
take your dog out. You still take your dog out. I mean,
We
I
have
guess
indoor
in
potties, you know.
yeah, and in my particular situation, it's probably I'm probably the last one that should find an issue with it because I have 3-pound dogs and I live in Texas where, the fire ants are bigger than my dogs.
True.
So it's not, I would probably find more benefit from something like that than, I think about big cities, New York and things like that. And people still take their dogs for a walk.
Sure.
Um, there's just there's ground and then there's ground. There's grounding that you get when you walk on actual earth and then a lot of people think you're grounded if you're walking on concrete. So, I think there's a
Well,
lack
and
of
I think just overall, though, the evolution, not just specific to grounding, you and I have talked about now there are machines specifically to make pet food at home. We've all seen the biscuit makers, but now we're seeing like, hey, make your whole meal. You're seeing, so many new things. And yeah, I think you and I have experienced this throughout our entire time, which is what is working in the human side eventually finds its way over to the animal
right.
side. And I know you and I had a conversation about 5 years ago about this, where it was interesting because I saw things that were in the animal space that hadn't yet made it to the human
Hmm.
space that then all of a sudden became the hot thing. And it's like, well, I've been doing this
Right.
for my, dogs for a while. So of course I, did that for myself. Um, but I just,
And
I,
we're a species that likes convenience. and
Yeah.
we like gadgets, so really I think the marketing is to that. But in the interest of the fact that we're called Practical Pet Chat, the practicality of it, again, people would come in my store and they'd say, what dog toothpaste do I need? Before I get all the haters out there, I support, if you want to give your dog a dog toothpaste, then, I'm not here to tell you not to do that. But, and I sold dog toothpaste because I had people who I would say, do you have coconut oil at home? Just use that, but then people would say, well, don't you have a dog toothpaste? So I had to start carrying it because that's what they really wanted. And, for the kind of store that I had, it was really difficult to find something that didn't have a lot of artificial ingredients in it, or didn't have things in it that I really didn't want my clients to deal with if they didn't have to. So I get it. I mean, I really do. The number of times that I would tell people, recently, not even my store, one of the a pet store that I was in recently, the guy came in and he was looking for cat shampoo, and everybody's running around trying to figure out which shampoo is the best for cats. And I'm like, okay, hang on a second. So I started talking to the guy and I was like, have you bathed a cat before? And he goes, no. And I said, okay, well, it could be a bit of a challenge. Your cat may have other ideas about it.
Sure.
So I'm not telling you not to do it, but what are you bathing the cat for? What reason? And he said, well, the cat's got cat acne on its chin. Oh, okay. So I took the cat shampoo out of his hand. I said, so you're going to bathe an entire cat to get the area that's right here? Cat's not going to love that. Um, I said, let's talk instead about how to keep that area clean and then the bowl that you're using.
Yep.
And, I recommended stuff that really wasn't in the store, of what I thought that he should use. We happened to be next to a drugstore, this particular store. So he pulls up on the phone right away. He goes, you're talking about this? And I said, I am. And he goes, where do I get that? I go, you could walk next door and get that. I said, but that's really what you need to do. Keep that area clean and dry. And then let's talk about the bowl that you're feeding out of. So we went down a whole completely different path. And at the end of it, he goes, I can't believe that you gave me all this information and I'm not buying anything. I feel bad. And I said, but you'll remember this store now, right? When you come back, because we're the
Right.
store that got you the answer. That was the best answer for your cat, not the one to try to sell you something. And he goes, I will. And I saw him three more times that week where he came in and he got cat treats and he came in and got some cat toys, and he's like, that's working. He goes, I can already see an improvement. And I was like, fabulous. Everything was better, cemented loyalty. But I think that a lot of times we overlook the simplest answer because we're looking for the dynamic answer, the wazoo, oh my gosh, this will solve everything kind of thing. I like what's come into the space, pet space for the most part. Um, Interestingly enough, because I was just at a trade show for the industry, I didn't see a lot of new innovation. I saw
Right.
a lot of repeats. Um, because once you bring something and to really put that in perspective, 10 years ago I was looking for the things that are now in the pet space because they were in the human space, to what you were saying. And I had gone to the American Holistic Veterinary Medical Association conference and for holistic veterinarians. And so the people that are presenting products in that space are not the typical people that are in the overall pet industry space. And I'm looking at this going, why isn't this offered in the pet space? And they're
Right.
like, oh, there's not really a market. And I was like, I think there's a market. 10 years later, guess what? Suddenly they have figured out along the way, not only is there a market, but people are now, where do I get that? How do I get that? Can you show me how to
Right.
use that? And now you're seeing the lasers and that you can use at home. Not all, and it's all a buyer beware. Like everything we purchase,
Sure.
a lot of times the advertising is better than the product. But there at least now is the option to look at things that you could never do before. Red light therapy.
Oh yeah,
People
no, I
people
skip
are
right
like,
that.
"What is that?"
Yeah.
That doesn't work. That's hokum. And I'm like,
But
actually, it's not.
yeah, but I think you bring up a good point though too, in that these have been around. I remember like I had a little palm-sized one a decade ago.
Mm. Oh, the red light therapy?
Yeah, and what I will say is, so you said, oh, there's not a market for it. I think sometimes you're ahead of the market
Hmm.
and it's the timing. It's not, there's no market for it.
No,
It's,
that's true.
are folks ready to think about those things? Um, because I certainly have had one of those for a very long time.
Hmm.
I'm looking at upgrading, as a matter of fact,
Hmm.
um, because of where the technology has also come, and then the price drops down, and then I think what happens is it becomes much more doable. I love the vet conference you just mentioned, one of my favorites,
Mine
just
too.
all around. Now, much smaller, as you and I both know, than probably most of the conferences out there, especially in terms of vendors that are selling things. But that view and that innovation, you're also dealing with an audience that is open many times
Right.
to new ideas. And I think that's a big part of it is if you're not open to the idea, and I like how you said, buyer beware, the advertising is often better than the results. Um, and we all know results differ for everybody, right? So I'm not bashing anybody who had that result. I
Right.
just did not get that myself for my pets. Okay.
Sure.
know, but I do I think the timing of things, and that's kind of what's caught my eye with some of this is, oh my gosh, I saw that a decade ago. This is not
Right.
brand new, the only, the first ever. It's like, no, you may be the first mass marketed one, you might be the first one with a lot of VC behind you, but this is not the first one.
Well,
um
I had an CC loop that I bought years and years ago at one
yeah,
of those conferences. And I don't even remember, it was a group that I was in that I was reading the thread. And people are like, "Have you seen this new loop they have?" And I'm like, "Oh my
right,
gosh, it's not new." But I'm so glad that people are becoming aware of it. My store was a good example of that because there was nobody that did what we did to the level that we did it with the holistic, homeopathic. I mean, I had the full line of all the homeopathic remedies,
right.
in varying strengths. Yeah, I had, people know some of the Bach flower, very few of them. They know the famous Bach flower remedy, but I carried the full line, and people are like, "What is this? And what do you do with it?" And then after people got over the shock of, I've never even heard of any of this stuff at that time, then it was there's a store that carries something that you should go talk to them because if all the pharmaceutical stuff isn't working, this is an alternative, and the irony to that is it's actually not the alternative. It's been around a whole lot longer
Right.
than Western medicine. It's just that Western medicine's done a better job of um, spending its dollars on self-focus than
Sure.
a lot of the alternative remedies that have been around forever. So I'm thrilled about that. I do see, I'm also somebody, I like to try all the things that are out there. So
Right.
I'll look at something for a while and I told you I bought a pet food maker and I make my own pet food anyway. And I supplement that with some commercial, gently cooked foods as well because I'm not always on top of everything that's going on. So I don't want to run out of food. Um, I was so disappointed in this pet food maker because it was heavily hyped. It was super expensive. I stocked it for a while, and looked at it and owning it and using it, especially experienced in making food, it was two thumbs down for me. And, I gave you the litany of reasons um,
Right.
because yours and my conversations are heavily unfiltered. Um, but, and I don't want to call anybody out on this. So it
Well,
was
and I don't mean to cut you off, but I think one of the other things though too that you just said, which is so important, and I want anybody who's listening or watching this to understand this. In this instance, you're able to judge it much differently than
right,
other folks.
right.
You're able to decide, is this more convenient to use? Is this a better way than someone who is not doing any of that and has no pathway there? So
Absolutely.
I also try and keep that in mind. And I think even you, when you said that to me, you're like, well, Rob, you know what to do. Is it a matter of convenience? Is it goes back to kind of what you and I have talked about, where you will say to me often, stop, let me ask you a couple of questions. And if you do that to yourself, you also give yourself that balanced answer because, oh yeah, why am I trying to do this? What is my goal? I know this is probably not the pathway for me. Or, you know what, right now, this is the best pathway for me to get to where I want to go. So I'm going to try it and be observant.
Well,
And
and I'm in a different position too because with my group, I happen to be asked, "Hey, have you heard
sure.
anything about this machine?" And I said, "Well, it just happens to be that I just got it. So before I answer that, let me actually use it for a while and I'll get
Yeah.
back to you on that." So, I'm looking at a lot of things, even though I don't have a store anymore, I'm looking at a lot of things from the perspective of if I'm asked, would I recommend it?
Right.
Because I'm never going to recommend, I'm never an incentivized, recommender. I
Sure.
just I won't do that. It's like it and I'll be honest. And in this example, like you said, I was like, it's not for me.
Right.
Here's the flaws that I see. And some of those flaws would extend to the average pet parent because it's the flaws in the machine itself. But overall, if you didn't know what to do, yeah, it gets it done.
Right. Right. No, and so I'm on the opposite. I have, a number of folks know all the different things I've done in the pet space, and I have been a paid spokesperson for things. But I'm very particular in what I do, and I kind of take that same
Yeah, I'm
approach.
not saying I wouldn't accept being paid. I just have to like the product
Yeah.
in
No,
order to
well, and
do it.
here's the other thing too, right? You and I are both a resource for a lot of companies,
Right.
a lot of pet parents, a lot of stores. And I think that's, another area of this that I'd love to just get your view on because you were such a successful independent store. And to me, it was for the all the different things that you're talking about that you did. You didn't just stand out because of your products, because of your knowledge, because of your service, certainly not because of your location, although that's fine where you live. Uh, was not convenient for me, but I
It
would
wasn't
make the drive.
convenient for a lot of people.
I was just saying, most of us not that convenient. Um, but we should have like a rule if you have to drive past more than 250 cows, probably location
You
is not
drove past
your best.
cows to get to me?
I drove past cows to get to you. That's how much
I
your
can't help where
knowledge.
you live.
I live in the city. I live close to the ocean. No, but from the standpoint though, I think that's really important because I know you get a lot of these questions. I get a lot of these questions from the independent stores, and I know you and I both love them. And we're not going to see many of the things that you and I do find useful and helpful at the beginning stages and the cutting edge stages in these big box stores because they often want it to have been a proven successful product before they'll
Right.
ever put it on their shelves. And so I think that's the opportunity that independent stores have that I'm not seeing as much of when I go to the independent stores these days. And I don't know why. I mean, any
The
thoughts?
reason why, yeah, the reason why is because it's I mean the entire landscape has changed.
Okay.
for a brick and mortar store. I follow several websites about businesses closing down and things like that because I'm interested in the temperature of the retail market across the country. And it doesn't have to necessarily be the pet space, even though that's my focus. But when I'm in the forums and the groups reading the threads, people are like, "Does this sell well for you?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that is not the question to ask."
Right.
Because you have the power as a store owner to create your demographic. A good example of that is many years ago. I hadn't had my store all that long, and I was invited by an industry trade magazine to participate in a in-person forum um, that was going to be held in Beverly Hills, as a matter of fact. And stores of different sizes, different calibers were invited to this. And I'm just one little store, and there was some powerful independent chains at this particular forum. And the reason they do that for people who don't know is because manufacturers want to get a feel for input on products and packaging and that kind of thing, and so there's somebody that hosts the forum, and in this case it was that magazine, and they ask a series of questions, and it's sort of a big round table type of
Right.
situation where everybody weighs in on it. It doesn't always go well for the manufacturer, unfortunately, because sometimes it can backfire. um, but we're all truthful. And the reason there's a mix of different retailers is because there needs to be a mix to get a true feel. So I'm in a lot of these, and that has changed because now everything is done online. So there's not a lot of forums done in person anymore. But I read through it, and my husband went with me. Um, and was sitting next to me and writing little comments, and you know him, he's a crack up, but he's writing these comments and he says, "I don't know how that store does it. I mean, considering what they sell." And finally I was like, "Stop. That chain of stores is very well thought of and extremely popular in their area. And not everybody has to sell the same thing. You need to know your demographic, you need to create your demographic and your following, and you need to decide who it is you want to be. And if you're going to be one of many, then there isn't going to be a standout reason for people to go to you over going to, Fluffy's pet store and Spot's pet store and, Malcolm's pet store and those kinds of things. And I didn't care what other stores were doing. My store evolved and changed so many times because I was trying to read the client and what the needs were in the area. And when I started to gently move into the space of offering things, I mean, let's keep it in perspective. When I opened my store, not only could you play tennis in my store because there was hardly any inventory in it, but it was mostly clothing. And I wouldn't, I wouldn't even, I don't think I would put any clothing of any sort in my store now because that has evolved away from that from the
Sure.
predominance that it was. But people were in shock over people dress their dogs. Well, yeah, it was at the beginning of that,
Right.
and it was at the beginning of the my dog is my kid kind of thing, and in the time that I had clothing, I dressed a pig and rabbits and goats and, all kinds of things. And it was fun and it was a riot and people had fun with it. And there were a lot of practical reasons for it. But as it got away from that, I was trying to understand the direction of what people were looking for. And so a lot of times stores are afraid to change. They're afraid to lose the customer they have. I've seen it when a pet food goes in a direction where they come into this thread, the store owners will come into the thread and they're complaining about the new direction, but they're fearful to make the change. So they don't acknowledge it in the store. They don't want to lose that customer base. And it's like, well, you don't have to lose the customer base. You just have to let the customer, maybe carry less and point out to the customer why you're recommending a change and those kinds of, but there's a lot of fear behind it. And it's such a competitive landscape now. Because if you're just buying, um, I don't know, a toy, or you're just buying something that you just want to get it as quickly as possible and you're looking for the cheapest price, it may not be the pet store. The online marketplace is incredibly competitive. In my store, it was very much you really didn't buy anything that we didn't have a conversation with you. Even toys, customers would come in and say, how's this going to hold up? And I
Right.
could say, okay, well, that particular toy is not going to hold up really well, but it's a $4 toy. It's not meant to. You want something that holds up well, it's a $19 toy. and
Sure.
and and I would show them the difference, that kind of thing. But there would be instances where customers would come in, and it's way more prevalent now. They're looking for the cheapest price on something, and I didn't charge for the amount of time that we would spend with clients and work with them, and try to evolve past the I don't really know what's going on and or what I need to the let's try to understand it together. And then, every once in a blue moon, you get that client that would come in. And I had this conversation with the client. And I said, let me see if I understand this right. You're trying to buy it on Amazon. Amazon's great for a lot of things, but you're trying to buy this on Amazon, and it's $1 cheaper. All the help and information that I've given you in the last 25 times that we've gotten together with questions on your dog, that isn't worth $1 to you, because I also have extremely exceptional staff, that spends a lot of time with you when I'm not here. And you just sometimes have to point that out. And then they would go, oh, you know what? You're right. Because otherwise, if you're going to do that, then maybe the next time you have an issue with your dog, call your Amazon seller, and see if they're going to be able to help you with that. Because the importance of the independent retailer, if we aren't, first of all, as independent retailers, separating ourselves in some way to make us special, which incentivizes why people come into us, which really comes down to a variety of products, understanding the needs that would require those products, being able to suggest and address when people have questions in regards to those products. If you're not separating yourself in terms of training, interaction, that kind of thing, then you are going to run into the issue of, I can get this anywhere and I can probably get it cheaper. And so when people ask what's wrong, there's a lot of fear when you're an independent retailer, because it's a scary landscape now. It's
Right.
incredibly expensive. Distribution costs have skyrocketed because manufacturing costs have skyrocketed. You can't even go to the grocery store now and get out of there without, with 2 bags of groceries doesn't cost you over $100, and there's hardly anything in the 2 bags. And
Right.
that's not how it used to be. So we have to adapt to being able to understand where the customer is coming from and adapt to it's not an all or nothing. And I think that's where a lot of failure comes into place, because rather than trying to talk somebody into something that's going to cost them $200 to $300 a month to feed their dog something that's better, how do we fit that into improving on what they're feeding so that it's not an all or nothing? And
Right.
that's really what it comes down to. Empathy goes a long way when you're trying to stretch your budget. What shortcuts are you looking for? What would it mean to you for somebody to be able to say, okay, let's see how we can improve it? you know, Improving it with bone broth, improving it with goat milk, improving it with certain supplements, improving it with, just adding some real food into, not all, doesn't have to all be that way. Add
Right.
some real food into it. How do we separate ourselves and provide those products that will do that, instead of just trying to be the same store as the last 15 stores that the customer passed before they came to yours.
Yeah, and I think you hit perfectly on two things there. One, there are always multiple paths to
Hmm.
the end destination. And I think all too often we get so focused on I just got to get there. I need it to be and we start to shrink the different paths to where there's only one and we get in our mindset that there's only one. The secondary part is what you were talking about in terms of not just making the effort, the trust, the fear of, hey, I don't want to undercut. But I think that effort is also lost these days
It
because
is.
when you look at the big boxes, and not just in the pet industry, I'm talking just big boxes, it's almost now where you're expected to have done all your research and just show up at the big box and grab what you want. So that there,
Hmm.
to me, that's an opportunity for the independents. It's when you swing too far one way or the other, hey, that means the other side has the opportunity now
Right.
come back and bring some normalcy, bring whatever it is, a service, a product, etc., back to balance. And I think that's the thing. I also think you said something else that I wrote down here on the manufacturers and the product companies and how they communicate. I just it's interesting because we used to do a lot of things. I can remember flying all over the country to do things in person and spend the time. I'm a big in person, even though we're doing this, online. Is I like that energy exchange. I like to be able to feel
Hmm.
the words, and they just think in so much better. It was the same thing with all these different products, and it's hard for me now, as we were talking about earlier, with all the product things coming in. I'm a media person, I'm a tech person. I, can cut and, take photos and videos and make it look like, wow, you just climbed Mount Everest with this.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily the outcome. And when you're in person, a lot of that falls away and you're able to get into that, just shoot straight with me. And you can
Right.
tell so much easier in person. And I think the closest that we have to that now, unfortunately, is how are different brands communicating with their consumers? And I find myself, I'll gravitate to those who will have, hey, let's just have a discussion, even if it's online. And let's talk about the product.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, and we've had this discussion so many times, there are also the online bullies, they're the I know everything people, there's the, so,
My
you know,
way or no way.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it quickly devolves the same way it does in an in-person meeting to
You're killing your
yeah,
dog by doing that.
yeah, and it's like, okay, nobody came here with that intent.
Yeah,
And
that's not helpful.
yeah, exactly. um and you lose that community, and I do often think online, I'm like, if we were in person, would you say that? Because that's the filter I use. If I was in person with you, would I say what I'm about to type? And if I wouldn't, there's no need for me to type it. And what does it really accomplish? Many times now, if I'm seeing something really, really wrong that's going to harm another being, sure, I'll speak up. But I find it's just too easy for people to overload and push their own agendas. But I think it's also, so as much as it's hard for the stores to communicate and take that change. I think also manufacturers are also struggling with that change because I see these new products, and there are some that I see, and you and I have been doing this so long. Sometimes I can see a product and I'll be like, I love this product. It's not going to make it
Right.
because their messaging, they're not connecting,
Right. The
their
packaging is
distribution,
wrong. Yeah.
packaging. Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, it's tough, and
You know
it's
what's
a cycle,
interesting?
it's a circle,
It
you
is,
know.
but you know what the trend that I'm noticing in the last several months, and I read these threads just because it's fascinating. This is the when you can use something for good or evil. This is the using it for evil. And I get it, but if you look at the social media or online advertising that comes your way, or a company that is just posting something about their product. When you read through the comments, there is no flipping way there's that many positive comments. The spelling is correct, the grammar is correct. Oh my gosh, I love this product. I've been using it for the last 3 years, and this has completely changed my life. I highly recommend it. I would never be without it. And I read through these things, and then you hit on the comment that just is like a neon sign. Real comment, because they didn't use an apostrophe and I'm, they said something that wasn't necessarily glowing, or they had a question, that was like, I don't know, what about this ingredient? Will reach out to us by DM, and we'll answer. It's like, oh, that's a bot too.
Right.
So you can't trust anything anymore because you read the comments and, oh my gosh, all these people are using this. This is a great product. So you have to then take that product and you have to step outside of that, and you have to then research the product for legit reviews, and I mean,
Or you can reach out to friends. I mean, I will say,
yeah,
I think you and I are in a lot of different groups for a lot of different things. Um, and I may be making, a sizable purchase for my budget. And I decided I was going to get this 9 months ago. And I've read all those comments that you've talked about in all these different groups. And I've started to see, okay, this person thinks the way I do, or this person approaches this the same way I do. And I have reached out to them. Hey, I'm
mm-hmm.
looking at, is this something you would consider for the purchase of this? And it's been very interesting because it's really just back to, what is your neighbor's experience? What's your friend's experience? What are others in your, remember, we used to have all the dog groups, hey, I've got a husky, you've got a husky, what's working for you? We've lost some of that too, even within these groups, because there's just,
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
not to
because
sound
there's
so
there's
negative, but
people, they're paid. There's paid people for a lot of
oh
those.
yeah, no, exactly. And I don't think a lot of people understand that, is that
Right,
that is a full paid, sometimes department for some of these
right.
companies to just spend the day going in,
But do you
commenting.
know where that started? Do you know where that started? This was so long ago, and this was way before anybody had any idea to even think about doing this. There's a particular pet food, um, a Canadian pet food at that time, that promoted themselves almost exclusively in chats. Remember chats, chat rooms?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So they were in breeder chat rooms, they were in show dog chat rooms, and they paid people, and including their own staff, to get into these things and say, hey, I'm feeding this. And oh my God, my dog just won, first place and blah, blah. And people are like, what are you feeding? And I watched this brand just explode because of this. It was the most brilliant use of crowd manipulation that I had ever seen. And they were the first ones to do it in the pet space as successfully and as well as they did it. And they did it for a long time after they really became so widely sought after. And then they finally got into independence. They were not in big box. But it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal to witness. And I just thought it was so brilliant. And that then turned into more companies understanding the value of that, to now, of course, there's paid people and bots, and pretty soon there won't need to be paid people. It'll just be bots, if that's not happening already. But it's so it just adds to the obfuscation and the confusing of, what do I believe when you're the average pet parent? And it's why, I mean, there's people in my group still, that will never get out of that group, even though they hardly ever have any questions,
Okay.
because they want a resource that they know they can trust. And no matter what, some of these clients I had for the full time for the 20 years I had my store. And they're like, please don't ever close this group. And I go, well, when I die, it will close probably. But I don't have any intention on closing it because I want to be there for you. I want you to be able to ask a question. I had a back and forth with somebody who said, I went ahead and emailed, based on this conversation, the company, and here's what they sent me back. I was like, this is fabulous. Cut and
Right.
paste the email responses back and forth. And I said, so let me read between the lines for you. And I went in and dissected the email. And they
Right.
were like, oh my God, I totally see that, but I didn't see it at the time. And I said, well, because they actually didn't answer any of your questions, but they were sure great about it, weren't they? And they gave you all this other information that made it really look like they were transparent, but they never answered your question. Or there would be people say, well, this brand of dog food, blah, 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 blah. What's wrong with the ingredients? Okay, let's look at the ingredients. Is there something wrong with them? Only you can decide that. But I can break down each ingredient for you for exactly what it means and how it translates into reality. If you can't pronounce it, here's why. And everything below the salt divider is means this. Everything above it means this. I mean, now people are a little more savvy than they were, which hopefully continues. Everybody gets smarter as time goes on and they learn more. But a lot of people didn't understand for the longest time that ingredients are listed in, the amount of what they put in. So, people will point out to me all the time, look, meat's the first ingredient. And I'll be like, uh-huh. Do you know how much water is injected into meat oftentimes? And by the way, did the company say that this was meat before it was cooked or after it was cooked? Because it will change that list of ingredients considerably, depending on how that was done. And people look at me and they're like, oh crap, because they didn't know that. And it just the you and I are so heavily immersed in it, and we're not the only ones. There's a lot of people that are passionately, immersed into this at levels that most people's eyes would glaze over, and the kind of conversations you and I would have on something other than, this particular type of a forum would probably put a lot of people to sleep. And you and I are excited about it, because it's our thing, it's our jam. But just breaking it down for people in understandable terms changes the world so
Right.
much. And that's how my group became a group, was because so many people would come, why isn't this information out there? Well, I quickly learned that I couldn't put the information out there without
Right.
putting it in a closed group. So, that's how I created that, because I would be shut down. And it had to be worded, still has to be worded. This is what I would do. I'm not advising you. I'm not a veterinarian. I'm not diagnosing. I'm not even recommending. I'm going to tell you what I would do if this were my dog. You do what you want to do. If this is not
Right.
something you agree with and you don't want to do, I wish you and your animal a long and healthy life together. Bottom line,
Right.
I always wish that. But you're here and you're asking for a reason. So I'm going to tell you what I would do. And I'll tell you why or why not. My group, I'm incredibly transparent and honest. And I will completely say, is it okay? Yeah, most people would probably be okay with that. I'm not
And
okay with it.
yeah, and I think that's, you brought up a couple of things I want to hit on. Number one, um, your group when they reach out, because I've talked to a lot of manufacturers and product companies that will say it's just what you just said in terms of being able to give out advice.
Mhm.
Some of that's right, some of that's wrong. At the end of the day, though, I do sometimes lean towards their situation because of my involvement with different companies.
Mhm.
People have such a this is going to fix everything
Right.
attitude when they buy something. This toy will never be shredded, or this, food is going to make them, shine and glow in the dark in a positive way and hang from the moon if they want. Um, And I think that's that other part of, you really have to take some personal responsibility and accountability in all of this and say, again, nothing is one way, nothing
Right,
works for everybody. What am I seeing? How do I know if it's working? Not just the statistics on the package, not just that. I mean, I think you and I have both experienced, there are things that we've seen that this would be wonderful, this would be amazing, and then it doesn't work for one of our,
right,
dogs or cats or pets. And it's like, why? It's because it's an individual being with an individual system with
right.
individual outcomes. And I think that's that part where we swing one way too far as a pet parent. We want to do the best. We got to do the best. This is the best. Wait, why didn't it? It had to be, sometimes it just was nature, you
Right.
know. And I think that's that other, tough part. It's very easy to become a pet parent.
Well,
You
and
do
let's
get
put that in
training.
perspective.
Yeah,
Let's put that in perspective for a second. It's not like people are saying, "Ooh, Lauren, what do you do?" I'm a pet parent too. It's
are
not
you sure?
like,
I think I've seen a few of those
no, no,
videos.
no, but you know what I mean. My experience on that is based on the fact that at heart I'm really a researcher. And so I used my store and a huge number of clients' experiences to
Right,
guide me on, okay, this product overwhelmingly is phenomenal. It's not going to work for everybody.
right,
We can try it. We can see how your kid does on this, but this is why I recommend product A over product B and C, in your particular instance with what you have going on, and it was great because I would eliminate products because I'm like, oh, I love this product. I want it to work. I really do. I mean, there's a brand in particular that is very popular. A lot of people love it. And our mutual friend, who is a distributor, uh, asked me about it. She loves the brand as well. And I was like, can't sell it to save my life. I said, I like it. It just doesn't knock my socks off. It just isn't overwhelmingly, it just isn't overwhelming. It just doesn't do what these other products I have, stand out because it's like, whoa, that was phenomenal. Is it a good product? It is. It's sourced well, it's made well. There are people who love the brand. It's just, I'm not going to carry it because over here, these three products overwhelmingly fit 95% of my clients,
right,
that's really what it comes down to. It's not my personal opinion is my personal opinion. But if I know something works, I carried stuff if all I ever carried in my store was stuff that I personally loved, it'd be a very tiny little store, But if I knew something worked, I might not love that it had vegetable glycerin in it, or glycerin at all in it. Um, because that's not really something I want in the product. In the big scheme of things, 99% of the customers' dogs or cats did phenomenally well and loved it. It's a
right.
treat, I mean, it's a small thing. As opposed to this has wheat and soy and corn in it, it's like, yeah, no, that will not be in my store. Yes, you can get it elsewhere, but it's not going to be in my store. So it's that sort of thing. It's not just and to go back to what we were talking when you were talking about neighbors, I have issue with that because neighbors feed something and think their dog does great on it. And if their dog came in to my store, I could probably look at the skin, the eyes, the teeth, the coat, and see, oh no, what are you
Sure.
feeding? But dog loves it, does great on it, well, we all do great on stuff until we don't. And so there's a little bit of that. And just as an example, kibble keeps teeth clean. I still hear that to this day. The numbers of people that would come in and I go, why do you feed dry food? Well, because I want to keep my dog's teeth clean. Uh-huh. So do you eat Doritos or, any chips or, it doesn't have to be Doritos. Do you eat any chips, corn chips,
Right.
anything like that, anything hard? Do you eat rock candy? Do you eat anything? I can't think of anything else that's hard. Nachos. I don't know. And they'll be like, yeah. And I'm like, does it keep your teeth clean? Because that's not how that works,
Right.
number one. And it would have to be so hard, like a bone, that actually chipped off the plaque and the tartar. It has to be a repetitive motion, And on top of that, dogs have hinge jaws. They don't have lateral movement. So
Right.
what you think is chewing isn't actually chewing, it's breaking to make it smaller. And,
Right.
you hit people with 6 or 7 things in a row like that, and they're like, oh, my vet said it would keep their teeth clean. Okay, I understand. But that's not how that works. I mean, I'm just giving you the science. Scientifically, this is not how this will work. And sure enough, when I finally get that same kibble feeding client in with their dog having just had a dental, I'm like, okay, let's move on to something else that might be better for your dog. Because clearly, keeping this as the focus isn't working. We'll address keeping your dog's teeth clean separately, but in the meantime, you're here about the food. So, a lot of times the always heard, always said, always repeated kind of stuff isn't necessarily the good guideline on that sort of thing.
100% agree with you. And I think that is one of those practical things that people were doing that we used to have. I mean, we go way back before pet food in bags, etc. It was off the table. What do you feed? Wow, that dog is. So you do see different things. But you're right. I mean, I don't think anybody goes by what does my neighbor do or what does
Oh,
my
yes, they do. Oh, no, they
do.
do. They do.
Boy, that's just not me. But I welcome their insights. I think one of my favorite things is when people don't know any of my background and they'll, pontificate as if they are very well versed. I'll give them the benefit of doubt and be going off. And the whole time in my head, I'm like, wow, what was that saying? There's always somebody smarter in the room. It's like, dang, you are really overreaching on your own personal experience is often
Hmm.
where the failing comes in, to your point. And I think um, there's a lot of that. But where else do you go when you're bombarded with
You
a
don't know
hundred
who to believe.
ads? Yeah, I can't go on, well, half the social media networks I don't trust anyway.
You
But that
can't
all being
trust them. Yeah.
I was going to say, by the way, your group will be there until they decide your group won't be there,
That,
much like it all works out until it doesn't work out.
right.
But no, I love what you're saying. And I think at the end of the day, it does go back to it's on you to really, I mean, observe, ask the questions, take notes. I think that's what, the last thing I'm just going to throw out there is how many folks just keep a little journal about their pets. What was working because there's the seasonality of things.
Right.
There's the what's going on in your life that's adding to their stress. What's like
Hmm.
if you don't have any of those perspectives as you're trying to, gosh, they were so healthy 6 months ago, and now, well, not just what's been going on in their life, what's going on in your life, what's going on in the world around them that's impacting them. And that is one thing, that really came home to roost for me with sugar. I know sugar developed some of the disease and whatnot because she was taking on my stress for what myself and my family were going through at that time. And
But you
while we were
can't,
doing all
how do
these
you
other,
change that? How
you
would you
can't,
have changed
you,
that? You can't.
I wouldn't, but I could have been more in tune with it.
Hmm.
Um, and I actually now it's so fun. I was watching my favorite football team. I won't put it out there because I don't want anybody else to go through the stress that I go through. But here I am screaming and yelling and cheering, and Bella's got her hand right on my hand, like, "Hey, yo, Dad, they're gonna lose in the end, right?" And I'm like, "I know, Belle,
Well,
but okay,
might
I'll
be
calm down."
reaching a little bit, but
Yeah. But the point was she could sense,
hmm.
and so she'd scooch in a little bit more. And he's now absorbing, and I'm aware of it now. And I try and reset myself. And when she comes in and puts her head on my, lap, or she's in the office with me and she just says, "Hey, you've been sitting there for a while. Let's go get some sunshine." In the past, I'm so focused. Now I really do make an effort to, you know what? She's telling me she's sensing something in me. Now, not every time. Sometimes she's a little stinker, but other times she's just saying, "Hey, I'm sensing it. I'm feeling it. I'm absorbing it. Let's go take a walk. Let's just clear our head for 5 minutes." And I didn't always have that perspective. But when I look back on things that I would write, what's going on in my life, what is sugar absorbing, what's Zoe absorbing, those different things. Um, that's how I was able to see sometimes what was and wasn't making a difference. And I was surprised to see sometimes we were probably a bigger impact with our environment and what we were going through and our stresses than maybe what we are doing. I always, intention, synergy, what are you putting into that? We both know a lot of people who make their own foods. You make some of your own, I make some of my own. And the one thing that I always know is the positive is if you're doing it with the right intention and the love, as opposed to, "Oh, I have to do this. I just got to try, blah, 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 blah," because you're just in the wrong mindset. You're
Right.
going to make mistakes. You're going to miss things. And so I just, now you can we've had that discussion. I don't want to go too far off because we
So,
are near the end here, but I'll
well,
let you have the final say.
since you bring up going, taking your dogs out for a walk, one of the things that makes me crazy. So I now live in Texas, and the area that I live in is freaking gorgeous, and it has all these pathways through a lot of woody areas, and I mean it's just miles of trails, and it's really beautiful. People walk their dogs a lot, and then while they're walking their dogs, are doing this.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, can't you
Yeah.
be there even now with your dog? You, not to mention what you're missing out on all around you. Okay. But you're not watching your dog. You're not bonding with your dog. You're not in tune with your dog. This can't wait for whatever, 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is. You can't just put it aside. Not to mention what you do for the dog.
Right.
I mean, it's being there and being um, in the moment. I mean, we all know that dogs live in the moment. Look how
Right.
much smarter than us they are.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
and the other point to what you're saying too is dogs in particular, they want your happiness. They want you to be present. They are there as much for you as for themselves. And when you're on the phone, I mean, Bella will do that to me. She'll, put her paw on the phone. My wife will, be on the phone and she'll put her head in front of the phone, like, "Hey, I'm here too. I love you." And yeah, I mean, I think I was recently in New Mexico and decided to, go see some petroglyphs and other things. And it was an amazing experience. But what I did was put the phone away.
Yeah,
And had
to
I
be in
not,
the moment.
yeah, to be in the moment. And had I not, I actually got lost. I'm not a great hiker, as we all know. And if you don't know that, please don't go hiking with me because I am not a good hiker. Um, and ironically, um, had I been on my phone the first half out and then I made a wrong turn somewhere, it would have been probably much worse case scenario. And I think, that happens often. What really disappoints me on these walks, and I do take Bella out and whatnot, is I'll see a very overweight dog on a hike. And I had an instance last year
Ah,
that we go regularly, and yeah, I could hear the screaming, and I unfortunately instinctually knew what it was. That dog should never have been asked to make that kind of trek. And here they are trying to get back to the car, and it's just And I just, to some extent, even almost kicked myself saying, I should have said something like, please tell me you're not going to try and make the whole path with this dog. That's mean. Your intentions might be great, but your results are going to potentially be awful. And
But
so,
people are so ingrained in thinking, I mean, people would come in and say, I know my dog is overweight. Now that the weather's getting nice, we need to start going for walks. And I'm like, hang on a minute.
yeah, exactly.
I'm like, no, I
Yeah,
want your dog to lose weight first
right,
before you take them out and start expecting them to do things that is too much on their knees, too much on their hips, too much on their heart. And
right.
I'm talking morbidly obese dogs, and people's immediate go-to because they've been ingrained that way for themselves
Right,
is more exercise. We need more
right.
exercise. I'm like, no, you need less food intake and to get somewhere where you're comfortable. And the dogs want so desperately to make us happy, they're just going to go along.
Yeah. Well, and what screams in my head as you're saying that is you can't out exercise a bad diet.
Right.
So true, not just for us, but especially for our animals. And to your point on always wanting to please us too, I've yet to meet a dog, at least, that will not clean their bowl as to what is in their bowl and what falls from other people's plates and bowls. They are the ultimate vacuums. So you may think you're exercising for one thing, and the reality is throughout the day they've picked up many other things.
Yeah.
It's just it's yeah. I mean, again, having that awareness, being present, definitely there. This is great. This is another great conversation. Thank you so much, and for all of you who listened and made it this far, thank you. Um, this is why we do this to share these kind of conversations that you and I have on a regular basis. So. Um,
But our conversations last 2 or 3 hours, so they're getting off easy.
well, we're gonna cut down on the exercise of 3 hours and try and keep it to. I just looked over at the clock and it's over an hour. So hopefully we'll have hit a few things though that everybody out there can appreciate and learn from because that's the point of all this for all you out there listening. It's just if one thing resonates with you, it was worth sharing with you. So
Yeah.
Lorin, thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it as always.
Likewise.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.